Hi everyone, welcome to Celebrating Women in Science. We are here to commemorate the 11th of February, which is tomorrow, the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. We are going to talk about remarkable female scientists whose contributions have been forgotten or either were not included in books. We think that it's very important to give the credit for these women in first place as they deserve it, but also we think that this is good in order to stop the inequality of women and men in science and to inspire new girls and little girls to pursue a career in science. First of all, I would like to introduce us. We are the Spanish researchers in the United Kingdom, known as SRUK, also CERU, Científicos Españoles en el Reino Unido. We have different missions. One of them is to create a social network for all of our Spanish researchers who have moved to the UK, either to study or to work. We also try to engage with the general public by doing public engagement events. We also go to schools. We represent the Spanish researchers in the UK to British and also Spanish organizations. And also we mediate between Spanish and English researchers and enhance collaborations between them. Tonight we are going to talk myself, Dr. Claudia Roman. I am the director of SRUK Midlands, Laura Bravo, the vice director, the secretary Carlos Guillén, Miguel Ángel, Aleña, which is our treasurer and online manager, Jorge Mellado, Dr. Marta Domínguez, Doctora Cristina Gutiérrez, and Maria Fernández. And sorry, I forgot here to say, very important. If anyone wants to know more about us, you can go to our website, sruk.org.uk, to our Facebook or Twitter page. We also have a YouTube channel where we upload podcasts and where we will upload also this video after when we finish. And well, it's important to say that SRUK-CERU is divided across the United Kingdom territory. So we are Midlands, SRUK Midlands specifically. And if you would like to know more about what we do here in Midlands, you can find us on Facebook in our page, which is SRUK Midlands. Or if any one of you would like more about what do we do, what are the benefits to become a member, we give you grants. We give also the possibility to network between different scientists in your field, or even if you want just to know more people, it's a perfect opportunity. And don't hesitate and drop us an email if you need anything to ceru.midlands@gmail.com. So I have already introduced all of us. We have chosen two scientists that have been important, or we thought that they are important alongside during history. And yeah, we will be giving the turn to all of us. So let's hope that is easy to follow. So I would like to start by making a first question to you. Why do you think that is important, or why do we think that we have an International Day for women and girls in science? Have women not been part of science before or all time? The answer, of course, is yes, but we know that has been a discrimination for women to get into science and the STEM field, science, technology, engineering, and maths. And we would like to promote and give role models to female scientists to study these careers. Also, these women that made into the field very often have been given less credit for their discoveries in comparison to their male colleagues. So this is known, it has a name, is the Matilda Effect. And I would like you to listen more about it by watching the video that our colleagues from the Organization of Women in Technology and Science launched, which is No More Matildas.
Can you imagine what would have happened if Einstein had been born a woman? We probably wouldn't know who Einstein is today, because the merits of those discoveries would have been taken by a fellow male researcher. This phenomenon, known as the Matilda Effect in honor of Matilda Jocelyn Gage, who was the first activist to denounce it, highlights the injustice of systematically ignoring the findings of brilliant women scientists throughout history. Women who fell into oblivion and could not become role models for all those girls whom we have made believe that science is only for men. This is logical if we consider that the female presence in educational materials barely reaches 7.6%, a statistic that perpetuates stereotypes and probably explains why only 28.5% of students that enroll in science degrees are women. This is why we're launching No More Matildas, a movement to bring all these female scientists back where they belong, starting, why not, with textbooks. Because talent has no gender, and to ignore the one that could emerge in young girls who don't choose a science degree because they don't have mirrors in which to see themselves reflected is a cultural legacy that we should stop perpetuating. Join us, share, and help us inspire girls to know that if they want, they can. No More Matildas, an initiative of the Spanish Association of Women Researchers and Technologists.
So, after all of this introduction, explaining what is Matilda Effect and who we are, let's begin with our journey through centuries to talk about different remarkable women. So, if we think in very in the past, probably many of you will know Ipatia due to the movie Agora by Alejandra Amenábar, which won 7 or 8, I can't remember, Goya Awards in 2009. And who was this woman? So Ipatia was born in the 4th century in Alexandria, the province of Egypt, and she was the daughter of Theon of Alexandria, who was a known mathematician and astronomer. He was very well known for editing the most popular writing in maths, which is the Elements. And Ipatia was as good and remarkable as his dad. She was the first female scientist in history. Consider, I have put here a question mark because obviously this is the first one that we know, doesn't mean there has not been others before. She was famous for her comments in maths and philosophy in the studies of other authors. So let's say that she was working as a PI, what we know today as a PI. She was giving advice to other authors how to correct and comments in their studies. She was a teacher in the museum, which was very famous building in the past, where there were laboratories and also observatories. People from very far away was coming to here just to listen Ipatia lessons. Ipatia had a very strong interest about sky, and she constructed astrolabes, which are elements to measure, to identify the stars. And with that, she drew a celestial map. She was a Neoplatonic philosopher, which was considered as a pagan at the time. And let's say that it was quite a bit of time for the pagans, Christians, and Jews. And due to all of this, she had a quite dramatic end when Bishop Cyril of Alexandria gave orders to kidnap her to a group of monks. And you can read different versions, but she was brutally assassinated, either by, they say, pulling apart her limbs, setting on fire. What they didn't know is that thanks to this, she was immortalized as a martyr for philosophy. Probably due to this, we know her story today. Otherwise, it will have been probably lost. And this is the most famous portrait, Ipatia.
So now moving a bit closer to our times, I want to talk to you about Isabel Zendal Gómez. Isabel Zendal Gomez was a Spanish nurse and the supervisor of an orphanage. She participated in the Balmis expedition, called in Spanish La Real Expedición Filantrópica de la Vacuna, at the very beginning of the 19th century. At that moment, smallpox was causing a lot of deaths in the world. So this expedition, founded by the Spanish king Carlos IV, that had lost a daughter due to this disease, had the aim of vaccinating millions of people in South America and Asia. The smallpox vaccination method was to inoculate the cowpox virus in healthy people that developed the disease, the bovine form of the disease. That was much less severe than the human form, and they got immunized against this human form. The problem that they had was that at that time, there was no way of keeping the virus alive during the trip, during the travesty again, through the Atlantic Ocean. So what they did was include in this expedition a group of orphan boys, and what they did was to inoculate the virus in two of them, keep them isolated from the rest of the people in the expedition, and when they developed the disease, they used the liquid from their pustules to inoculate another two boys. In that way, they keep spreading the virus and passing it from two to two boys, and they were able to get it alive to America. Isabel Zendal was the only woman in this expedition, and she was in charge of taking care of this group of boys. So its role was really essential for the success of the expedition. This expedition not only was able to vaccinate a lot of people, but also establish vaccination teams that will continue with the vaccination program. Although in 1950, the World Health Organization recognized Isabel Zendal as the first nurse in history to take part in an international mission, I think that most of us only know her name because of the emergency hospital built in Madrid last year as a consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think it's important that we know a bit more about her.
Sophie Germain was born in the late 18th century in France. Although she never attended school or university, she became one of the most brilliant mathematicians of her time. When she was only 13, the French Revolution happened, and because the atmosphere was volatile in the capital of France, in Paris, she spent most of her time in her house. There is when she discovered the library of her father and started to read mathematics books. Her parents weren't very happy with this because at that time there was a huge prejudice against women learning mathematics because it was thought it was too difficult to them. But nevertheless, she became very well knowledge in mathematics and started to have correspondence with other important mathematicians of the time, like Gauss or Lagrange. But she feared that they wouldn't take her seriously because she was a woman, so she wrote them under the name of Monsieur Leblanc. Her identity was known when Lagrange wanted to meet her. And when Gauss learned that Monsieur Leblanc was a woman, he wrote her to praise her not only because of her work in mathematics, but also for her courage to try to overcome the prejudice against women working in mathematics. Besides of number theory, she worked in other areas like the theory of elasticity. When Sophie passed away, Gauss wrote that he lamented that she didn't have had enough academic credit.
So the next one is Elisabeth Blackwell. She was born in 1821 and we are now celebrating her 200th year anniversary, given that she was born on the 3rd of February. She's well known because she was a British physician, and most importantly, she was the first woman to receive a degree in 1849 in the United States. So she's also well known because she was a moral reformer and especially pioneered the promotion of education for women in medicine. And her legacy at the moment is still intact because we have a medal that was initiated in 1949 that is awarded to medical professionals that promote women in medicine. So we know a lot about this woman because she wrote an autobiography in 1895 where what she said, amongst other things, was that she pursued a doctor's degree because she considered it a moral fight. So just very briefly, to explain a little bit what her story was like, she decided to pursue medicine and applied to 12 different colleges in New York, but got rejected in all of them, except for the one for Geneva Medical School, where she got accepted, but because the people there considered that it was all a joke. She struggled. She even got told to disguise as a man, as other previous women had done, like Margaret and Bulkley. But she ended up graduating and became a source of inspiration for everyone. She practiced medicine in the UK, where she met the famous Florence Nightingale, a nurse. And then she also went to France, as well as coming back then to the US, where she couldn't find a job because she was a woman, but ended up establishing her own private clinic with her sister. In her work, she focuses on obstetrics and nursing and public health too, and she mainly advocates for services to the most in need, as well as female education, and she has set up the London School of Medicine for Women in the UK.
Okay, next I want to tell you a little bit about Neti Maria Stevens. Stevens grew up in America shortly after the Civil War. And as you may think back on that time, if a woman wanted to pursue a career, it was just limited to being a nurse, a teacher, or a secretary. But Stevens really wanted to be a scientist. So what she did, she just studied to be a teacher, and then she kept teaching to save money, to continue studying, and then she get through school by this. Until eventually, finally, when she was 39 years old, she got a position as research scientist. Shortly after this, she got a PhD in 1903 in studies about cytology. And for this PhD, she was supervised by Thomas Hunt Morgan, which is a famous geneticist that some of you might know already. And her work was influenced by E.B. Wilson. She was studying the mealworm beetles, and while observing the sperm and the eggs of these beetles, she realizes that the male sperm either contain a large chromosome, which now we know is the X chromosome, or a Y chromosome, which is a small chromosome. And she realizes that when the female egg is fertilized by the sperm with the X chromosome, it will lead to a female, while if it's fertilized with the sperm with the Y chromosome, it will lead to a male. And that's how she concluded that the sex is inherited as a chromosomal factor, and that the males determine the gender of the offspring. This is what we know now as the XY sex determination system. However, it was Wilson, the one who get more credit for this, and he is the one that is more commonly cited as the discoverer of the sex chromosomes. This is because he wrote a similar study and results at the same time. However, he strongly believed that actually environmental factors really play a role in determining the sex, and not only a particular chromosome, as Stevens was claiming. After time proved that Stevens was right. However, he just revised his previous publications, and he deleted the reference that he was doing to these environmental influences. And instead, Wilson just cited Stevens' work as supporting his own original theories. So this is why we believe this is a real case of Matilda effect.
Henrietta Levitt was born the second half of the 19th century, and she joined the Harvard College of Astronomy a few years after finishing university. Her work at Harvard was to study a type of star called the Cepheid variable. And these stars were known because their brightness changes, but they didn't know why or what that meant. So Levitt had to study this type of star, but not with telescopes, because at that time, women weren't allowed to use telescopes, or she couldn't have photos like this, very sharp and very clear. Instead, she had to use the best technology at that time, which were these glass plate photographs, where the stars were very dark dots. So you can imagine the effort, the meticulousity, the capacity of this woman to go through these plates, identifying in different places the same star, and then different intensities of their brightness. She discovered that there's a relationship between the maximum intensity of a star, of this type of a star, and the period it takes to reach it. And thanks to this relationship, she managed to establish a law that allows to measure galactic distances. Until her discovery, we could only measure the distance between stars or other astronomical objects if they were close to Earth. But thanks to Levitt, we could measure distances in the outer space far away. This discovery has an enormous importance, because thanks to it, it was discovered that the solar system is not at the center of the Milky Way, for example. It was discovered that the universe is expanding, and that this expansion is accelerating. In 1925, a Swedish scientist wrote to her to tell her that he wanted to nominate her for the Nobel Prize. But of course, he was told that, unfortunately, Levitt had died 4 years earlier.
Mileva Miller was born in Serbia in 1875. She had to move to study. She was a very brilliant student since she was a child, but she had to move countries to study, in this case, physics and mathematics in the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. During that time, she had to deal with a lot of problems, prohibitions against women taking courses, as you may imagine, but all the teachers and the rest of students always remark how good she was and how clever she was, and she always got good marks within the process. In that school, she met someone very important in science called Albert Einstein, and actually they got married in 1903, having 3 kids in common during the relationship. Of course, there aren't clear arguments about Mileva Miller participation in Einstein's research, but the opinions of a few experts, and more importantly, the release of a few letters between Mileva and Einstein in 1987 could show that actually Marik's contribution was vital for Einstein's discoveries. Einstein always talk about both of them and about their experiments and discoveries as we, ours, and always in plural. So we could say that Mileva was quite important for that. Obviously, Mileva Miller is part of the Matilda Effect. She was a brilliant scientist, but once Einstein signed the work with his name, they couldn't revert the process. We can't do it now, imagine in that times. But we could say Marik's ideas were central to Einstein's science, but as in these cases happen, individual women contributions are almost impossible to separate.
Okay, so now it is the turn of Alice Augusta Ball. She was a North American chemist. She was not only the first woman and first African American to receive a master's degree from the University of Hawaii, but also the first one to become a chemistry professor there. There in Hawaii, she studied the chemical properties of chalmugra oil. This is a natural oil that was used as a treatment for leprosy. At the time, leprosy was a disease with virtually no chance of recovery. People diagnosed with leprosy were exiled to the Hawaiian island of Molokai with the expectation that they would die there. At the age of 23, Both discovered that making some chemical modifications to the composition of the chalmugra oil, it could be injectable and absorbable by the body, developing a novel technique for the treatment of leprosy that would be employed worldwide for over 20 years. Unfortunately, due to her untimely death at the age of 24, Ball was unable to publish her revolutionary findings, and here comes the shocking part. Arthur Dean, another chemist at the University of Hawaii, stole her work, began producing large quantities of the injectable chalmugra oil, chalmugra extract. He published the findings without giving Ball any credit, and even he named the technique after himself. Thankfully, years after Ball's death, she started getting some of the credit that she deserved. The University of Hawaii finally honored Ball in the year 2000 by dedicating a plaque to her on the school. Also in 2016, not that far ago, a really famous Hawaiian magazine placed Ball on its list of the most influential women in Hawaiian history.
Okay, so now it's the turn of Ángela Ruiz Robles. Ángela Ruiz was a Spanish teacher, writer, and inventor. She dedicated all her life to improving teaching methods and to making education accessible for everyone. That was a hard moment in Spain because it was just after the Civil War. So she not only teach children at school, but also help adults in her free time. She also wrote 16 books and developed many inventions. The most important one is the one called Mechanical Encyclopedia that can be considered the precursor of the electronic books that we know nowadays. This device was designed to reduce the weight that the students had to carry, as it was designed to keep the information of several books. It also had a light source because access to electricity was not so common those days. It could also include an amplifying lens for the people with visual problems. It was also designed to be used in different languages and to adapt very well to the specific needs of each student. However, Ángela never saw this device working as it was supposed to do, that was helping students. However, in 2016, Google dedicated her a doodle for her looking forward inventions and ideas.
So next one is Chen Xiongbu, also known as Madame Bu. So she was from China, and she started, she was in high school in China, and she also went to university in China, and later in life she moved to the United States to complete her PhD, since there were not PhD in physics at the time in China. So she made two main contributions in particular to nuclear physics. So the first one was that she contributed to the Manhattan Project. That was a very ambitious project that took part, that happened in the Second World War, in which the atomic bomb was first developed. And her role in this project was to develop a method to separate uranium-235 from uranium-238, since you need uranium-235 to make an atomic bomb. And the second discovery was in 1963, is that she demonstrated that the beta decay from nuclear particles it doesn't happen in a random direction, but but actually the experiment she made is that she put two sensors in both sides of an nuclear an atomic sample that produced like beta particles, and she discovered that the beta particles were not evenly distributed between both sensors. And this was a very important discovery, and it's a bit out of the scope of this talk, but she really contributed to the development of the standard model. That is the model that is nowadays used to understand particle physics. And in fact, her two colleagues received the Nobel Prize for this discovery, while she didn't. And she received another medal from the US, but actually she was not recognized together with her two mates in the Nobel Prize, which is really a case of Matilda. And just finally, a funny note that her students also called her like the Dragon Lady due to her character, mainly.
Katherine Johnson was born in 1918 in the United States. She was born in a very poor family. Her dad was an agriculture and her mom was a teacher, but she was very clever. She wanted to study. So at age 15, she enrolled in mathematics at West Virginia State. And after all, she was the third African-American woman to receive a PhD in mathematics. And actually, she got it with summa cum laude. So you can see she was quite good. She started working in what we call now the NASA, and she did a few very important projects. One of them in 1957, she provided and did some of the maths for the 1958 document called Notes of Space Technology, and formed the core of the Space Travel Task Group, the NASA's first official foray into space travel. So a quite important achievement. Then she did quite a few different things. She did a trajectory analysis for Alan Shepard, America's first human spaceflight. And in 1962, she was in charge of running all calculations for John Glenn's orbital mission. So she did a quite good job in NASA, but she was mainly forgotten. And that's why I think we have to add her in the list of the Matilda Effect, because it wasn't until like 2015, at age 97, when she was awarded by Barack Obama, the president of the United States at that time, with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which is the America's highest civilian honor. In 2016, there was also a film release called Hidden Figures, which explains the story of Katherine Johnson and another African-American woman that worked in NASA and were in charge of these projects I've told you, but also a few more. And I wanted to point out that she died very recently. She died almost a year ago, February 24, 2020. And what the NASA's administrator, James Bridenstine, said was, our NASA family is sad to learn the news that Katherine Johnson passed away this morning at 101 years old. She was an American hero, and her pioneering legacy will never be forgotten. So I think I can't have more words to say.
Sorry, you stopped my video, host Claudia. You have to allow me to start my video again. Anyway, we can start. So now is Elena Alpine's turn. She was born in Moscow in the year 1935. She was graduated from the Faculty of Physics and Mathematics of the former Soviet Academy of Sciences. She's now retired, but she spent most of her career researching about computational chemistry. By the time she started her research, women only made up about 1 to 2% of scientists working on this area. In 1973, in her PhD thesis, Galpern made the first ever computational prediction of the stable structure of Buckminster-Fullerene, or C60. This is the cool molecule that you can see in the slide. These kind of molecules got an amazing properties and are used nowadays in catalysis, in electronic devices, and even in medicine. It wasn't until 1985 that someone could publish the experimental production and observation of C60, of this molecule. The doctors Harold Kroto, Robert Karl, and Richard Smiley did it using Elena's calculations. And here again, the sad part. They won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in the year 1996 for this discovery, but even though Elena's work was crucial for this, she got no credit at all.
So next one is Deborah Siew-Lanjing. So she was born in 1968, and in 1997 she started her own group at GILA. That is an institution which one of the things they do is to study experimental atomic physics. And actually, 2 years after starting the group, she developed the ability to create the first quantum degenerate gas of fermionic atoms. After that, following this line, in 2003, she and her team were able to condense fermionic atoms. So to condense fermionic atoms, you only can condense bosons, bosonic atoms. So to condense fermionic atoms, you have to make pairs, either in molecules or make them interact. And I don't want to go too much into this, but the importance of this condensate of fermions is that follows the same physics that is behind superconductors. And superconductors are materials that can conduct electricity without any resistance. And if we are able to produce a superconductor material at room temperature, it will mean a revolution, complete revolution in technology as we know it nowadays. So this area is very promising, and actually she even got a prize in 2005. She was the second youngest woman to get elected to the National Academy of Science of the US. And the sad part here is that although she was somehow recognized, is that the scope of her research, so she died very young, like she died in 2016, and still her results will help a lot of research in the future, and she won't be able to see that.
And now we go into Esther Duflo. She was born in 1972 in Paris, and she won the Nobel Prize. She's well known because she won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2019, becoming the youngest person, 46 years old only, and the second woman to win it in this discipline. And she won it alongside two of her colleagues for their experimental approach to alleviate global poverty. So basically, this experimental approach consists in doing small interventions, generally in developing countries, and measuring how well they do, and then implementing the ones that show best results. So they tried this approach in the fight towards malaria by trying to assess how to best distribute insecticide-treated nets. And so they asked the question, should these nets be distributed for free, or should they be available for a small fee? By doing this intervention, what she showed is that the best adoption was if they distributed them for free. And after the wide adoption of nets, this is thought to be a major factor in the fact that now death mortality by malaria has decreased in around 75%. So her story goes as follows. She studied history and economics in Paris, then did a PhD in the MIT and became a professor there. And there she also co-founded and co-directed this lab where she's running all of these different experiments. So Up to now, she has done around 400 experiments. And well, if you want to see what she's also, what these experiments are about, she has loads of different resources, such as a talk in 2010, a TED Talk, or a book that she published in 2011 that was a bestseller called Poor Economics. And then I just want to talk a little bit further on this paper that she published in 2018 on gender studies that was specifically targeted to gender quotas. So a gender quota is a way in which to increase the representation of women in politics. And so they do this by making sure that there's a reserved position, a reserved leadership position for a woman. So they implemented this kind of intervention, gender quotas, in India. And what they showed is that by doing this, there was a very much improved perception of men towards women in leadership positions. There was also increased aspirations of girls. It also helped women to be elected even when the gender quotas were removed. And in general, there was a higher investment in public goods. So even though Esther Duflo hasn't suffered the Matilda effect per se in her own skin, she, with her studies, is helping fight the battle against gender inequality and also serving as an inspiration for younger generations too.
And finally, our last woman today is Katarina Carico. Well, Katarina Carico hasn't suffered the Matilda effect, or at least yet, but we thought it was very relevant to bring it up today because she's behind the technology of the RNA that is being used in the COVID-19 vaccines developed by Pfizer and BioNTech. So you can see her there in a recent article for The Guardian that you can look more information about her. And but who is this woman? So she's a Hungarian biochemist. She was working in RNA synthesis back in Hungary until she was invited to Temple University in Philadelphia. At that time, as she said to the journalist, she left Hungary in 1985 to pursue an academic career in the States with her husband, a toddler, and just 900 pounds hidden in a teddy bear. In 1989, in the medical school of the University of Pennsylvania, is when they first saw, Katalin and her team, they first saw that the RNA technology, they can work to express proteins in cells and potentially be a tool for treating certain diseases. So she wanted to continue the studies in optimizing this technology to treat cystic fibrosis, strokes, and other diseases. But unfortunately, all the grant applications she was writing, they keep being rejected and rejected. Luckily, she met Drew Wiseman, that he was working back then in the HIV vaccine, and he got very interested on her. So they started a collaboration, and they achieved a major breakthrough in 2005. This major breakthrough was the injection of RNA in an animal usually was leading to a big inflammatory reaction. And what they found is that replacing uridine, which is just one of the 4 blocks that form the RNA, replacing this uridine with another analog avoids the serious inflammation, which has been very, very relevant for the use of these technologies nowadays. However, back then, this received very limited interest and they didn't receive any funding. Fortunately, a few years later, the founder of Moderna, after reading this paper, their work, decided to collect some funding and creating this company, Moderna. And at the same time, Carico and Weisman, they licensed this technology to BioNTech, a small German company at that time, and now famous for the vaccine. So now she's still senior vice president for BioNTech, and she has been suggested as a possible Nobel Prize winner, all together with Drew Wiseman.
So we need to finish our journey today during the centuries with all the female scientists that we have presented. We have done 15 of them today. However, we know that there have been many, many other ones that we didn't have time to talk today, as you can see. But we would like to finish with a positive message. If we look into the Nobel Prizes since the 1900s till now, we started by giving 4 prizes to women, to 5, 3, 11, 7, and in the last 2 decades, there have been 28. So there have been 58 in total that are much, much less than when we compare with men. However, we can see that we are definitely in the right direction and that we are increasing this number of prizes and recognition. So what we want is like, hopefully we will see no more Matildas.